They told you sex is just physical, that it's instinct, animal, dirty. So you try to suppress it, ignore it, pray it away. But what if they were wrong? What if your desire isn't your shame? It's your soul, knocking from the inside. Carl Jung didn't see sex as sin. He saw it as symbol. A sacred message from the deepest part of your psyche, disguised in the rawest human form. You are not being ruined by your desire. You are being called by it, not to indulge, but to awaken. And the more you pretend not to hear it, the louder it controls your life. This isn't about lust. This is about power, integration, and becoming whole, because what you're running from might be the very force that was meant to set you free. Carl Jung never believed that sexuality was a problem to be fixed. He believed it was a message, not just from the body, but from the soul. In a world obsessed with sex, and yet terrified to talk about it with depth, we've become spiritually starved and emotionally confused. You can see it everywhere. Billboards, clickbait, reality shows, even casual conversations among friends. Sex is visible, commodified, and overused, but understood. Rarely. We live in a strange contradiction. We're surrounded by erotic imagery, but emotionally numb to its meaning. We consume pleasure, but ignore what it's pointing toward. Desire has become something to either act out or repress, not something to listen to. And in Jung's eyes, that's a crisis not of morality, but of the soul. He believed sex was never just about sex. It was the soul's symbolic language, using the body to speak truths the conscious mind is too afraid to face. The body is not the enemy of the soul. Jung warned that one of the most dangerous spiritual lies is the split between body and soul. That in order to be pure, we must reject desire, that to be spiritual, we must silence the body. But what happens when you silence the very thing that gives you life? You don't become enlightened, you become fractured, numb, split into a person who performs spiritual perfection on the outside but secretly wrestles with shame, longing, and confusion on the inside. This is what Jung saw happening in modern religion and psychology alike. A denial of eros, the life force, the sacred current of desire that isn't asking for indulgence but for acknowledgement. Your body is not against your soul. It is your soul in physical form. And when it burns with longing, it's not trying to destroy you. It's trying to wake you up. What if desire is divine? When we think of desire, especially sexual desire, we often default to guilt, taboo, or fantasy. We assume it's about gratification, domination, or shame. But Jung believed desire was symbolic. It always meant something deeper. What if your craving for intimacy isn't about sex at all? What if it's about connection, about the part of you that longs to be seen, held, or mirrored? What if your attraction isn't to a person, but to what they represent, a part of you you've disowned, a need you've buried, a truth you've ignored? Desire, Jung said, isn't a sin, it's a signal. And when you repress the signal, you don't kill it. You just push it underground where it grows louder, darker, and more distorted. This is how addiction starts. Not from freedom, but from disconnection. You're not obsessed with pleasure. You're starving for meaning. Why your libido isn't just about sex. Freud believed libido was simply sexual drive, a biological instinct. But Jung disagreed. He saw libido as psychic energy, a life force that can express itself through many forms. Sex, yes, but also art, dreams, ambition, obsession, prayer. When your libido is unconscious, it becomes compulsive. But when it's made conscious, when you reflect on it, question it, even embrace it, it becomes sacred. It becomes transformative. This is why Jung saw monks and mystics channeling their libido into devotion. Artists turning longing into poetry, leaders channeling charisma into collective awakening. The goal isn't to erase libido, it's to alchemize it. That process, Jung said, is what makes us whole. Ancient traditions already knew this. What Jung articulated through psychology, many ancient cultures expressed through ritual, in Tantra. Sexual energy is seen as a path to enlightenment, not through orgasm, but through union of self and other, union of masculine and feminine, union of ego and soul. In Taoist alchemy, the body is not seen as sinful. It's a sacred temple where spiritual energy circulates. Even in early Christianity, mystics like Saint Teresa of Avila described their connection with the divine using erotic language, not because they were confused, but because eros was the only metaphor strong enough to contain the depth of their longing. Jung connected these ancient truths with modern psychology. He said, "The psyche speaks in symbols, and sex, in our dreams, our fantasies, our compulsions, is often the symbol for something we forgot, not something dirty, something sacred. The more you suppress it, the more it controls you. We've been taught that if we repress desire, we'll gain self-control, but Jung said the opposite is true. Whatever you repress controls you from the shadows. The person who pretends to be beyond desire often becomes enslaved to it in secret. It leaks out in judgment, passive aggression, addiction, manipulation, shame, and sudden emotional collapse. This is not self-mastery. This is self-denial. You can't be spiritually free while living in fear of your own erotic energy. You can't become whole while chopping off the part of you that longs, because longing is not weakness. It's human, and according to Jung, it's holy. A modern culture starved of meaning. We have more access to sexual imagery than any generation before us, but we also have more confusion, more shame, and less intimacy. We know how to scroll. We don't know how to connect. Jung would say, this is the shadow of a culture that worships stimulation but fears introspection. We've replaced eros with performance, intimacy with validation, union with consumption, and worst of all, we've told ourselves that this is freedom. But it's not real freedom. Jung would say, begins the moment you stop pretending that sex is only about pleasure. The moment you ask, what does this desire mean? What is my soul trying to say through this feeling? What part of me is trying to come back to life? Because once you ask that, you begin the journey not toward gratification, but toward integration. When most people hear the word libido, they think of sex. They think of attraction, hormones, physical touch. But Carl Jung saw something far deeper. To him, libido wasn't just a drive. It was life energy itself. And if misunderstood, it could burn you out, but if harnessed, it could lift you into transformation. Freud described libido as a primitive force, rooted in the sexual instincts of childhood. He believed almost all human behavior could be traced back to repressed or redirected sexual urges. Jung didn't reject this outright, but he went beyond it. He said, yes, libido can express itself sexually, but that's only one of its masks. Underneath the surface, libido is psychic fuel, a raw, burning, creative current that seeks expression, not just through the body, but through ideas, ambition, beauty, music, spiritual devotion, and when blocked or distorted, that same energy can become obsession, addiction, destruction, the two paths of libido, sublimation or compulsion. According to Jung, every soul faces a choice. Will you channel your libido consciously or let it control you in the dark? This is the great paradox. The same energy that makes us fall in love can also make us ruin our relationships. The same passion that drives genius can also drive madness. The key isn't repression, and it's not indulgence. It's direction. Jung used the concept of sublimation, the idea that raw sexual energy could be transformed into higher forms of creativity, art, and insight. You don't ignore your desire, you work with it. You let it pass through the fire of your awareness and reshape itself into something meaningful. This is the secret of poets and mystics, of prophets and dancers, of spiritual seekers who, instead of silencing desire, alchemize it. But what happens if you don't? Then libido takes the path of compulsion. It becomes an unconscious tyrant showing up in addiction, craving, manipulation, emotional affairs, and endless cycles of guilt and pleasure seeking. You're not in control. You're chasing dopamine, not wholeness. artists and addicts. Same fire, different outcomes. Jung often said that the addict and the artist are not so different. They both feel too much. They both carry a burning inside that doesn't fit into the ordinary world. But one turns that fire inward into numbing, escaping, or destroying, and the other turns it outward into colour, shape, movement, language, presence. The difference is not how strong their desire is, it's how aware they are of its purpose. Think of figures like Vincent van Gogh or Sylvia Plath. You can feel the sexual tension behind their brush strokes and poems, not erotic in content, but in force. That's libido trying to find a form it can survive in. Now think of figures consumed by excess addiction, over-sexualization, emotional chaos. Not because they were weaker, but because they had no container for their inner flame. Without a path, libido becomes wildfire. With awareness, it becomes light. Libido is direction, not destination. Here's where Jung's view radically diverges from pop culture. Desire isn't something to act on immediately, nor is it something to fear. It's a compass. Just because you feel desire doesn't mean you must satisfy it directly. But you must investigate it. Ask it, why are you here? What are you trying to tell me? You might crave sex, but truly hunger for connection. You might crave control, but actually long to feel safe. You might crave intensity because life has become numb. Desire is rarely literal. It's symbolic. And if you're willing to trace it, not just indulge it, you'll find that it always points toward a missing part of yourself. Modern life and the hijacking of libido. Jung lived in a pre-digital age, but his warnings ring louder than ever today. Because today, libido is being hijacked by social media algorithms, by clickbait culture, by industries that profit from your restlessness. You're taught to chase pleasure without meaning, to scroll instead of create, to consume instead of connect. And every time you chase another dopamine hit from a flirtation or a fantasy, you burn your energy faster than your soul can replenish it. That's not freedom. That's spiritual fatigue. Jung would say, you haven't lost your libido. You've just scattered it into too many things that don't nourish you. To reclaim it, you must slow down, recenter, and ask, what is my energy really hungry for? Libido and the call of the soul. Jung believed that libido, at its core, is not driven by lust. It's driven by longing. Longing to become whole. Longing to reunite the lost pieces of your psyche. Longing to remember who you really are. And that longing shows up as desire, because desire is how the soul gets your attention. When you ignore it, it haunts you. When you shame it, it controls you. But when you honor it, it guides you. You begin to notice. Your craving for attention is really a call to be seen first by yourself. Your craving for sex is really a call to awaken your presence, your aliveness. Your craving for power is really a call to reclaim your inner authority. Desire is the whisper of your deeper self, not asking you to sin, but asking you to come home. What happens when libido is reclaimed? When you reclaim your libido, not through repression or indulgence, but through awareness, your life changes. You feel more energy, not because you're chasing stimulation, but because you're no longer leaking it. You feel more clarity, not because you've silenced your instincts, but because you've translated them into insight. You feel more wholeness, because you're no longer at war with the part of you that longs. And from that place, creativity flows, love deepens, spirituality becomes embodied, not floating above life, but rooted in it. That, Jung said, is the real meaning of libido. Not a threat, but a force of becoming. There's a part of you you never talk about. The part you hide when you smile. The part that lingers in your silence. It's the craving you call too much. The fantasy you laugh off but secretly revisit. The feeling that rises in your chest when no one's looking, then disappears before you can name it. Carl Jung called it the shadow. Not because it's evil, but because it lives where the light doesn't go. And more often than not, it's made of desire. The child who learned to hide. You weren't born ashamed of wanting, you learned it. From the way your parents tensed up when you asked innocent questions. From the way teachers said, don't touch that. Or, good girls don't think like that. From the sermons that whispered that purity means silence, not curiosity. So you learned to divide yourself, to present the version of you that could be loved, praised, approved, and bury the one that was messy, sensual, curious, wild. But energy doesn't vanish, it hides. And everything you push down into the dark, every desire, every fantasy, every hunger waits, not to destroy you, but to come back home. The shadow doesn't stay silent. You may have convinced yourself you're in control, that you've outgrown those urges, that you're beyond all that now. But the shadow has its own language. It speaks in compulsions, in shame, in sudden jealousy you can't explain, in the way you judge others for doing what you secretly long to do. The shadow doesn't come to punish you. It comes to reflect you, to show you what's still split, to remind you of what you had to abandon just to survive. And until you look at it, it will control you. Jung wrote, until you make the unconscious conscious. It will direct your life, and you will call it fate. But it was never fate. It was the part of you that wasn't allowed to live. The priest and the flame. There's a story of a man Jung once counselled, a spiritual leader admired by many. He had devoted his life to purity, to prayer, to the image of righteousness. But in his dreams, something else was happening. Each night, he saw fire, raging fire behind locked doors. In one dream, the flames burst through a chapel wall. In another, they consumed his hands as he tried to hold a sacred book. He came to Jung, terrified, afraid it meant he was unworthy, that he was losing his soul. But Jung smiled. He said, "You are not burning, you are being reclaimed." The fire was not hell, it was libido, unacknowledged, disowned, caged. And because it had no path to breathe, it came through in dreams, as destruction, when in truth, it was calling for integration. You see, the more we repress our desire, the more volatile it becomes. Not because it's dark, but because it was never meant to be locked away. The mirror you refuse to look into. You'll meet people who awaken something in you. Sometimes it's instant. A spark, an ache, a tension you can't explain. And you think it's about them, their beauty, their power, their mystery. But it's not. They're a mirror, reflecting the part of you you've denied. The sensuality you suppressed, the presence you lost, the playfulness you forgot how to allow. Jung called this projection seeing in others what you cannot yet hold in yourself. That's why you judge them, or chase them, or fear them, because they stir your shadow, and your shadow carries both your wounds and your potential. To integrate it is to reclaim not just what's painful, but what's possible. Addiction is not lust, it's longing. Jung worked with many who struggled with sexual obsession. Not just affairs or physical indulgence, but the ache behind it. They weren't bad people. They were split people trying to use the body to fill a spiritual silence, trying to quiet a hunger they couldn't name, and calling it addiction when it was really longing. Longing to be known, longing to be whole. We live in a culture that teaches repression, not reflection. That labels craving as failure instead of listening to what it's trying to say. But Jung believed that every compulsion is a coded message from the soul, and when we numb it instead of listening, we miss the invitation to heal. The shadow holds the map. Imagine a part of you you've never let speak. Now imagine that part has something to teach you. It might be painful, it might be uncomfortable, but it knows the way. Jung saw the shadow as the doorway to individuation, the process of becoming whole. Not perfect, not polished, but real. To face the shadow is not to glorify your darkness. It's to recognize that you are not just light. You are contradiction. You are complexity. You are both the one who prays for purity and the one who dreams of fire. And that's okay, because healing doesn't mean cutting off parts of yourself. It means bringing them home. From shame to wholeness. Shame is the glue that keeps the shadow stuck. It whispers, you're wrong for feeling that. You're sick for wanting that. You're dirty for remembering that. But Jung said shame is not proof of guilt. It's a sign that you've buried something human. You don't heal by punishing the body. You heal by understanding it, by listening to the longing beneath the desire, by letting your humanity exist alongside your spirituality, and then something shifts. You stop using sex to run from yourself. You stop using purity to prove your worth. You stop splitting yourself between saint and sinner, seeker and shadow, and you begin, maybe for the first time, to feel whole. There's a face you wear, not the one in the mirror, the one you've spent years perfecting, the one that gets you praise, the one that makes others say, she's got it all together. But behind that face, something is breaking. Carl Jung called it the persona, the mask we present to the world, not to deceive, but to survive. We all wear one. You were taught early on that certain parts of you weren't welcome. So you adapted. You shaped yourself into someone appropriate, modest, respectable, emotionally contained, spiritual, even. But the more you performed the version of yourself others wanted, the further you drifted from the version you were born to be, and the mask grew heavier, the mask of sexual cleanliness. In the realm of sexuality, the persona becomes especially dangerous, because nothing reveals the gap between image and reality quite like desire. You tell yourself, I'm above that now. I don't need to be wanted. I don't struggle with temptation. You quote verses, you recite affirmations. You tell yourself you've ascended. But late at night, something rises, a memory, a hunger, a dream that startles you, a longing that doesn't ask for permission. You panic. You pray harder. You double down on discipline, but you're not purifying. You're splitting, Jung warned. The greater the persona, the greater the shadow. The more you try to embody perfect self-control, the more chaotic the denied part of you becomes, because your soul doesn't want perfection. It wants integration, the danger of believing your own act. The persona isn't just how others see you. It's how you've come to see yourself. You believe your own act. You think your mask is your face, and over time, you forget what you actually feel, what you truly want, who you really are. You've traded honesty for admiration, authenticity for applause, wholeness for being good. But at what cost? You feel numb, disconnected. Not because you lack faith, but because you filtered your truth through someone else's idea of purity. Jung once said, we no longer live life, we perform it, and nowhere is that truer than in the performance of sexual denial. The Puritan and the seductress, two sides of the same mask. It doesn't always look like repression. Sometimes the persona takes the opposite form. Instead of hiding your sexuality, you showcase it. You become the seductress, confident, dominant, in control. But deep down, the same fear remains. If I'm not desired, am I even real? So you play a role, powerful, inviting, always needed. But after the high fades, you feel the emptiness, the ache that no amount of validation can fill. Both personas, the Puritan and the seductress, are masks. Both are rooted in fear. Both are disconnected from the raw, quiet truth underneath. You're not trying to deceive. You're trying to protect the vulnerable part of you, the part that still doesn't believe it's okay to be fully human. The cost of living in character, wearing a mask, is exhausting. It takes energy to maintain an image, to always say the right thing, to suppress the wrong feeling, to curate your sexuality into something clean, contained, and spiritually acceptable. And slowly, you begin to disappear. You feel disconnected in relationships. You struggle to feel real intimacy. You long to be touched. Not just physically, but emotionally, soulfully. But you've locked yourself inside a performance. And now you're alone in a role that's supposed to make you loved. That's not safety. That's self-abandonment. Jung called it a split psyche. When your outer world says I'm fine, but your inner world is screaming for truth. The war between persona and shadow. Here's the quiet war most people are fighting. The persona says, I'm not sexual. The shadow whispers, but I crave intimacy. The persona says, I don't need love. The shadow begs, please see me. The persona says, I'm pure. The shadow confesses, I feel desire. This war creates suffering, not because either side is wrong, but because they've been forced into opposition. Jung believed the healing begins when we stop trying to destroy one side and start listening to both. You are not either or. You are both and. You can be spiritual and sensual, soft and strong, sacred and human. You don't have to choose between approval and aliveness. You can choose to be real. The invitation to remove the mask. There comes a moment when the mask cracks. You meet someone who sees through it. You experience a loss that shakes your image. You fall in love or fall apart and realize the performance isn't enough. That's when the soul speaks. It says, come home, not to who you've been told to be, but to who you are beneath all that. The one who longs without shame. The one who feels without filter. The one who has nothing to prove. Removing the mask isn't about rebellion. It's about returning to the body, to the breath, to the sacred fire that has always lived inside you. It's not about discarding values. It's about discarding the fear that told you you were only lovable when silent. Jung believed this return is not easy, but it's necessary, because until you shed the mask, you'll never be seen. Not truly, not wholly, not intimately, and deep down. Isn't that what you've always wanted? In the quiet hours before dawn, when the mind is still and the body has surrendered, something deeper begins to speak. Not with words, but with images. Not with logic, but with symbols. And often, those symbols are erotic. You wake, heart pounding, confused. The dream lingers. A stranger touched you with familiarity. A flame burned beside a cave. A serpent moved beneath the floorboards of your childhood home. You dismiss it. Call it strange, maybe even sinful, but your soul doesn't speak in straight lines. It speaks in metaphor, in mystery, and in the most ancient language it knows, the erotic image. Dreams don't lie, but they speak in code. Carl Jung believed that every dream is a message from the unconscious, not random, not meaningless, a coded transmission from the hidden self. He said, the dream is the small, hidden door in the deepest and most intimate sanctum of the soul. And when your soul wants your attention, when it wants to show you what's missing, repressed, or forgotten, it often chooses symbols of desire, not to arouse you, but to awaken you. Desire, in the dream world, is rarely about sex. It's about union, the longing to be whole, the merging of lost inner parts, masculine and feminine, ego and shadow, conscious and unconscious. To dismiss an erotic dream is to miss the very key your soul just handed you. Common erotic symbols and their deeper meanings. Jung noticed that people across cultures dream of similar things. A snake, a dark hallway, an overflowing river, a kiss that feels ancient, a fire that never burns, but consumes everything. These aren't random, they are archetypal symbols from the collective unconscious. They carry spiritual weight, not just psychological curiosity. Let's explore a few. Snake, often seen as a sexual image, but for Jung, it represented transformation. The snake sheds its skin. It slithers through shadow. It carries primal wisdom. It can symbolize repressed libido or an invitation to awaken your life force. Cave or tunnel. Feminine archetypes. They symbolize the womb of the unconscious, the return to origin, a place of mystery, darkness, and creation. If you're entering a cave in a dream, your soul may be leading you back to something sacred you've forgotten. Fire, not destruction but purification. Erotic fire in dreams is about passion that needs to be reclaimed, not resisted. It can be creativity longing to erupt, or anger, or desire buried for too long. Water, often tied to emotion and the feminine. A submerged dream may reflect unprocessed feeling around intimacy, love, or vulnerability, the stranger or ex-lover. Jung taught that these figures often aren't about the actual person. They are parts of you. The masculine figure animus may represent your inner direction or assertiveness. The feminine figure anima may point to your intuition, receptivity, or soul longing. when you dream of intimacy with someone you barely know or someone you haven't seen in years, it's not always about them. It's about you. It's about what they symbolize. And that's the key. Erotic dreams are mirrors, not maps. Not all erotic dreams are gentle. Some are terrifying. Some are violent. Some leave you feeling ashamed or shaken. Why? Because the parts of you most repressed will often appear in extreme form. The unconscious doesn't care about your reputation. It cares about your healing. So if your dream shocks you, Jung would ask, what part of yourself are you still refusing to see? What longing have you buried so deep? It now appears as threat instead of tenderness. What have you labeled unacceptable that your soul is still trying to reconcile? Erotic dreams don't expose your guilt. They reveal your split. The gap between your inner truth and your outer mask. The energy you've denied for so long that it now screams to be acknowledged. The erotic symbol as a call to wholeness. At its heart, the erotic symbol is never just about sex. It's about longing for union. Sex, when symbolic, is the psyche's way of dramatizing your need for integration. The longing to rejoin the part of yourself that's been left behind. In your waking life, you might appear calm, stable, even spiritually disciplined. But in your dreams, you may be wild, tender, open in ways you've never allowed yourself to be. That's not contradiction. That's wholeness trying to return. The erotic image is not a threat to your spirituality. It's your soul knocking from the inside. How to work with erotic dreams. Don't judge. Record. Write down the dream before you label it. Even if it feels strange or wrong. Get curious. Don't censor it. Ask, what is this dream trying to show me about myself? What quality, emotion, or energy is trying to emerge through this image? Identify the archetype. Is the person in the dream showing up as an anima, animus, trickster, or lover? What part of you do they reflect, feel into the body? What emotion lingers after the dream? Is it longing, fear, excitement, shame? Let it speak. Welcome the symbol. Don't reduce it. Don't say it's just about sex. Instead say, this is about energy, connection, meaning. Jung warned that reducing the erotic to the physical kills the message. Practice integration. Can you find a healthy way to express what the dream stirred? Through art, movement, journaling, conversation, reflection. Because the more you explore the symbol, the more you release its shadow. And what once felt taboo now becomes transformational. The soul's secret language. Carl Jung once said that dreams are how the soul compensates for what we've ignored in waking life. If we live too rationally, our dreams become wild. If we deny our sensuality, our dreams become erotic. If we perform too much purity, our dreams become flames. This isn't failure, it's balance. Your erotic dream is not dirty. It's deeply alive. It's the soul reaching through darkness, through silence, saying, come back. You are more than a body to be restrained. You are more than a soul to be sanitized. You are a whole being yearning to be known again. Somewhere along the line, you were taught a dangerous lie. That your body is separate from your soul. That your longing disqualifies you from purity. That if you want to be sacred, you must silence what is sensual. This lie didn't begin with you. It's been passed down for generations through religion, culture, shame-based parenting, and distorted spirituality. It taught millions to fear their bodies, to equate holiness with denial, to believe that desire must be crushed, not questioned. And yet, it never worked, because you can suppress longing. You can perform morality, but deep inside, your soul knows something else. The sacred and the sensual were never meant to be enemies. They were meant to dance. When the body became the enemy, look at nearly every major spiritual tradition, and you'll find the same tension, the craving for heaven, and the shame around earth, the hunger to ascend, and the guilt for being here in flesh, in blood, in desire. We were told to fast, to purify, to overcome the flesh, to mistrust pleasure, to view sex as distraction. even danger. And while there is wisdom in restraint, Jung warned that repression breeds distortion. When you divide yourself into sacred above, sensual below, you fracture the soul. You try to be holy, but you become hollow. Your body becomes something you manage, not inhabit. Desire becomes something you suppress, not understand. Touch becomes something you fear, not feel. And worst of all, you begin to mistrust the very language your soul uses to speak to you. Because according to both Carl Jung and Edgar Cayce, the body is not a curse, it is a compass. It tells you what the mind cannot articulate. It holds emotion the intellect avoids. It remembers truths your ego has forgotten. To exile the body from your spirituality is to lose half of your wisdom. The split shows up in quiet ways. It shows up when you hesitate before reaching for affection because you don't want to seem needy. It shows up when you shut down pleasure because part of you still believes it's wrong to enjoy too much. It shows up when you over-spiritualize everything using light to avoid your shadow. You might not even realize it. But deep down, the message is clear. Be pure, not whole. Be praised, not real. Be spiritual, but not too human. This split between sacred and sensual is not just psychological. It's soul deep, and it's exhausting. Because the more you try to kill your desire, the more you kill your vitality. Edgar Cayce and the sacred body. Even Edgar Cayce, one of the most well-known mystics in American history, spoke of the body as a vessel of divine intelligence. He believed the soul chose the body for a reason, not to escape it, but to experience life through it. Cayce saw sex as neither dirty nor divine by itself. Its meaning depended on intention, on consciousness, on whether the act reflected love, integration, and union or compulsion, power, and disconnection. He believed that denying sexual energy entirely was not the path to enlightenment. Living in harmony with it was. Just like Jung, Cayce understood. The path to the soul doesn't go around the body, it goes through it. And when the body and soul work together, you no longer have to choose between being grounded and being holy. You become whole. Why we fear the merge. Why do we fear merging sacred and sensual? Because one makes us feel innocent. The other makes us feel exposed. One gets applause. The other raises eyebrows. One feels safe. The other feels dangerous because it touches what we can't control. Desire is messy. It doesn't follow rules. It stirs memory, grief, longing, imagination. But here's the paradox Jung and Cayce both point to. That's exactly where God lives. In the longing, in the ache, in the heat behind the heart, in the tears that rise when you're finally touched fully, emotionally, spiritually. The sacred is not absence of desire. The sacred is the intention within it. When the soul and body reunite, when you stop fearing your sensuality, when you stop treating the body as a spiritual liability, something changes. Your breathing slows. Your intuition sharpens. You no longer need to chase connection. Because you become connection. You can finally feel someone's hand on yours and not dissociate. You can move with rhythm, with expression, and not feel shame. You can sit in silence and feel alive because nothing inside is being silenced. This is not indulgence. It's integration. The moment sacredness touches sensuality, the body becomes temple, touch becomes prayer, pleasure becomes presence, and your soul finally stops fighting itself. The false dichotomy must die. Carl Jung warned that the psyche cannot endure a prolonged split. To deny one part of yourself creates inner warfare. And that war always has casualties. Your creativity, your intimacy, your peace. To live in alignment, the split must end. You must stop choosing sides in your own soul. You must stop labeling one part light and the other dark. Because in truth, the sacred and the sensual are two rivers flowing from the same spring. Both are holy, both are human, and both are trying to carry you back to yourself. Have you ever been drawn to someone you couldn't explain? Not because they were beautiful, not because they were good for you, but because something about them felt ancient, familiar, unfinished. It wasn't love. It wasn't lust. it was recognition. Carl Jung would say you weren't falling for the person, you were falling for an archetype. Not a body, not a personality, but a symbolic pattern from the depths of your unconscious. The image of something you lost, or never fully met, within yourself. What is an archetype? An archetype is a universal blueprint, a living pattern that exists in every soul. The lover, the warrior, the healer, the trickster, the muse. We don't just dream in archetypes, we fall in love with them. We project them onto others. We chase their reflection through every connection. We try to possess them, not realizing they were never outside of us. The woman who awakens your hunger. She may carry your forgotten freedom. The man who haunts your dreams. He may reflect your unclaimed power. The attraction isn't physical, it's mythological. And it speaks through the electric feeling of this person means something more. Jung warned, we always marry the wrong person, not because they're wrong, but because we meet them through projection. Projection, the mirror of the soul. To project is to place your inner contents onto someone else. To see not who they are, but what they represent to your psyche. It's why you might fall for someone unavailable, or idolize someone the moment they notice you, or chase someone who triggers your deepest wounds. You think it's fate, it's chemistry, but Jung would say it's reflection. You're not in love with them. You're in love with the part of you they activate. This is why relationships often begin with fire and end in confusion. Because when the projection fades, you see the person, not the symbol. And sometimes the person can't carry the weight of what you were trying to find in them. That's not their fault, and it's not yours. It's the nature of projection. It must rise in order to fall, so something deeper can emerge. Anima and animus, the inner beloved. Jung described two powerful archetypes within each person. Anima, the inner feminine in a man. Animus, the inner masculine in a woman. These are not gendered in a rigid way. They are energetic blueprints. The part of you that is receptive, intuitive, creative. The part of you that is assertive, focused, discerning. We are drawn to people who match our inner image of these forces, not because they complete us, but because they mirror what we've yet to integrate. A woman might fall for the brooding thinker because her animus is unexpressed. A man might idealize the mystical artist because his anima is buried beneath logic and control. The key is not to chase the image. The key is to recognize the image lives within you. And every romantic attraction is an invitation to meet that part of yourself. Archetypes in culture, myth, and media. Why do we idolize certain characters? Why do we fall in love with strangers we'll never meet? Because they awaken something symbolic. They become vessels for our archetypes. The siren, seductive, unattainable, both danger and beauty. The wounded healer, deeply empathic, chaotic, magnetic. The mystic stranger, elusive, emotionally unavailable, spiritually charged. The mother-father archetype, stable, nurturing, or dominating and controlling. When you look closer at your attraction patterns, you'll see themes, stories you keep replaying, roles you keep casting. Not to torture yourself, but because your psyche is trying to resolve something, trying to retrieve something. And often, it's not about finding the one, it's about becoming the part of you that's still missing. When archetypes become traps, the danger of projection is dependency. You believe the other person is the archetype. You think they can save you, fix you, make you whole, but no one can carry that burden forever. They falter, they disappoint, they become human, and when they do, you feel betrayed. But Jung would say, it wasn't betrayal, it was a mirror breaking. The image cracked so you could see your reflection beneath it. To cling to the archetype is to lose the person. To awaken to the archetype is to find yourself. Attraction is initiation. Every person you're magnetically drawn to is a teacher. Every heartache is an initiation. Every obsession is an unintegrated part of your soul trying to come home. The man you couldn't stop thinking about. He was the container for your rising courage. The woman you couldn't let go of. She was the reflection of your lost intuition. And when you face those projections, when you feel them fully, then reclaim them inwardly, you stop needing the mirror. You become the thing you were seeking. That is the work of individuation. That is the journey from fantasy to integration. The gift beneath the attraction. Jung didn't say attraction was wrong. He said it was sacred. Not because it guarantees relationship, but because it guarantees awakening, if you're willing to reflect rather than chase. The question isn't, why do I love them? It's, what part of me do they carry? What is my soul trying to show me through this connection? Once you ask that, the energy shifts. You no longer need to possess. You begin to understand, and from that place, love becomes possible. Not fantasy, not projection, but love rooted in truth first with yourself, then with another. There are wounds you cannot point to, not on the skin, not in the bone. They don't bleed, but they throb beneath every choice you make. They shape the way you say yes when you mean no. They hide inside your smile when you crave to scream. And they especially live in the quiet, confusing space where desire and pain collide. Carl Jung called it shadow material. Edgar Cayce called it karmic memory. But to you, it may simply feel like shame, especially when it comes to sex. Where did the wound begin? Maybe you can't name the moment. Maybe there wasn't a single event, but 1,000 subtle violations. The way someone looked at you before you even understood what it meant. The way your body was policed. The way affection was withheld until you earned it. Or maybe you do remember. The night that split you. The touch that wasn't safe. The secrets you never told anyone. And so you learned to disconnect, to leave your body, to survive through detachment. You stopped trusting pleasure, stopped trusting your own signals. You may have even stopped trusting yourself. This is what Jung meant when he said, the psyche carries everything it cannot release. It doesn't disappear, it hides, and the body remembers what the mind tries to forget. The erotic wound. There's a specific kind of pain that forms when desire is mixed with shame, when the thing that should feel natural touch, arousal, intimacy becomes a trigger, when love and fear arrive in the same moment, when longing feels unsafe. This is the erotic wound, and most people carry it in silence. They either act it out through self-sabotage or shut it down completely, convincing themselves they're above all that. But the erotic wound doesn't just affect your sex life. It touches everything. Your ability to receive, your sense of worth, your relationship with trust, with joy, with your own body. It even affects your spirituality. Because if desire is unholy, then your soul must be dirty. Right. That's the lie the wound tells you. And it's time to unlearn it. Jung and Cayce. The healing power of awareness. Jung taught that the path to healing is never avoidance. It's consciousness, to bring into light what's been exiled in shadow, not to fix it, but to understand it. Cayce echoed this. He believed that the soul chooses challenges not for punishment, but for growth, even wounds, even trauma. He said, you meet yourself over and over again, until you see yourself clearly enough to choose differently. What if your erotic pain isn't proof that you're broken, but evidence of a deeper part of your soul calling out for integration? What if the very area where you feel most ashamed is the doorway to your greatest spiritual reclamation? Reclaiming the body. For many, the first step in healing the erotic wound is coming back to the body, not to sexualize it, but to occupy it again, to breathe into the parts you once fled, to feel without flinching. This doesn't start in the bedroom. It starts in the breath, in allowing yourself to enjoy warmth, movement, nourishment, stillness. When you learn that your body is safe again, your soul begins to speak through it. And that's what Jung meant when he said, your vision will become clear only when you look into your own heart. Who looks outside? Dreams. Who looks inside? Awakens. Your erotic wound cannot be healed through external validation. It must be witnessed within, with tenderness, with slowness, with truth. The trap of overcompensation. When we carry shame around desire, We often swing to extremes. We become hypersexual, chasing experiences to numb the ache, or hyperpure, burying the ache in morality or control. But both paths are distortions. Both are masks that say, I don't trust myself. Healing begins when you realize you don't need to perform either role. You don't have to prove that you're over it. You don't have to prove that you're untouched. You only have to tell the truth to yourself. I feel longing, and I don't know what to do with it. I feel frozen, and I'm scared to thaw. I crave touch, but I don't want to disappear again. These are not confessions of weakness. They are invitations to reclaim your humanity when you're ready to remember. There may come a moment in your healing when something returns, a memory, a dream, a strange rush of grief during intimacy. Don't push it away. Don't spiritualize it too fast. Let it rise, because the erotic wound doesn't just hold pain, it holds power. It holds the fire you had to suppress, the voice you had to silence, the vitality you had to sacrifice to survive. And when it returns, it doesn't come to destroy you. It comes to restore you, not to who you were before the wound, but to someone deeper, someone wiser, someone whole, from wound to wisdom. Carl Jung believed that your greatest wound becomes your greatest teacher if you're willing to sit with it. Not escape it, not rush it. Just sit, listen, ask, what is this pain trying to reveal about who I truly am? What part of me did I lose? And how can I welcome it back? Because when the erotic wound is finally seen, when shame dissolves under the warmth of compassion, your soul exhales, and you begin to experience sexuality not as danger or performance, but as presence, as connection, as aliveness, not because it's perfect, but because it's true. You were never meant to fear your sexual energy. You were meant to work with it, not as a force to suppress, not as a hunger to blindly follow, but as a current, a signal, a sacred catalyst for transformation. Carl Jung believed that sexuality was never just about the body. It was about evolution, about the soul trying to become whole. And he wasn't alone. Edgar Cayce described sexual energy as a spiritual fire, one that could either consume or refine, depending on how consciously it was directed. So what if your desire, your craving, your tension, your longing isn't an obstacle, but a starting point? What if, beneath every impulse, there's a message, and if you trace it deep enough, it leads you not to gratification, but to your calling, the creative core of libido? In Jungian psychology, libido is not just sexual desire. It's the raw energy of the psyche itself. It powers your thoughts, your ambitions, your art, your love. It's the invisible fuel behind invention, dance, poetry, worship, parenting, and rebellion. When you feel deeply moved by a sunset, that's libido. When you paint for hours without noticing the time, that's libido. When you ache to merge with someone because they awaken something ancient in you, that, too, is libido. And the way you handle this energy shapes everything. Because as Jung wrote, this energy can create or it can destroy. It depends on your consciousness. 2 roads. Obsession or alchemy. You've probably seen both. The person who becomes addicted to validation, who chases body after body, high after high, and still feels empty. That's libido with no container. It becomes obsession, and eventually collapse. Then there's the person who channels their longing into something greater. The poet, the dancer, the healer. The mystic who turns craving into clarity, who transforms ache into art. This is alchemy. The spiritual process of transmuting desire into growth, not by denying it, but by listening to it. Desire says, I want. The soul asks, but why? Behind the desire to be touched, may be the need to feel seen. Behind the craving for pleasure, may be the yearning for safety. Behind the fantasy of escape, may be the longing to come home to yourself. When you ask those questions, you stop being ruled by libido and start walking with it. The role of awareness, Jung was clear. Sexual energy is only dangerous when it remains unconscious, when you pretend it's not there, when you act on it blindly, when you suppress it out of fear. That's when it takes over. Not as divine power, but as compulsion, as guilt, as sabotage. But the moment you shine awareness on it, it softens, it speaks, it becomes an ally, because libido doesn't need to be punished. It needs to be partnered with. You don't conquer fire by putting it out. You learn to cook with it, to warm your home, to create something worth offering. Sexual energy and the soul's direction. Both Jung and Casey believed that desire, when understood, can guide you to your higher purpose. Casey spoke of soul evolution, that the very urges we struggle with in this life are echoes of karmic lessons we've chosen to refine. So when you feel a pull you can't explain, a magnetic force that challenges you, ask, what is my soul trying to learn through this energy? What strength is being forged in the fire of my desire? Maybe it's discipline. Maybe it's courage to feel without acting. Maybe it's compassion for yourself and for others who struggle to be whole. Desire points to where you're still fragmented, but it also shows where you're most alive. And that life force, it wants to move through you, as you, beyond you, not in chaos, but in direction, transmutation in everyday life. You don't need to become a monk or mystic to work with your sexual energy. You just need to become present when you feel aroused. Don't rush to release it. Breathe into it. Let it rise through your chest, your hands, your voice. Turn it into movement, into melody, into prayer, into presence with your lover, where touch becomes communion, not consumption. Let your desire wake up your body, but also your mind, your intuition, your creativity. This is not denial, it's direction. And that direction becomes transformation, from heat to healing. For many, sexuality has been tied to pain, to trauma, to control, to absence. But when you reclaim your sexual energy, you reclaim your power. You begin to realize that your body isn't just a site of memory. It's a place of rebirth. You can take the heat of all that has burned you and turn it into light. You can take the ache of longing and turn it into connection. You can take the very energy you once feared and let it become the fire that forges your next chapter. This is how the erotic becomes sacred, not by eliminating it, but by honoring it, respecting it, and choosing to walk with it. Awake, you've spent your life splitting yourself in two. Mind versus body, holy versus human, shadow versus light. But there comes a moment, quiet, unforced, when you realize wholeness was never about choosing one side. It was always about becoming both. Carl Jung called this process individuation. The sacred journey of returning to yourself, not the self the world told you to be, but the self that holds every forgotten piece, every longing you once buried, and every truth you were once afraid to speak. And at the heart of that journey is desire. Individuation is not perfection. We think awakening looks like rising above craving, transcending the body, living in some polished version of ourselves where nothing can shake us. But Jung would disagree. He said, wholeness does not mean perfection. It means embracing brokenness. You do not become whole by eliminating the parts of you that ache, hunger, or tremble. You become whole when you let them speak, when you listen instead of judge, when you stop pretending you're already healed, and finally ask, what is this pain trying to become? That's where individuation begins, not in transcendence. In truth, your desire is a messenger, not a mistake. Every longing you've ever felt is a clue, a breadcrumb on the path home. The desire to be touched, maybe it's not about skin, but about being seen. The desire to be wanted, maybe it's a mirror for the parts of you you've never loved. The desire to lose yourself in someone else, maybe it's the soul's cry to reunite with a piece you've left behind. Jung believed that desire was directional, not always literal, rarely convenient, but always meaningful if you dared to ask what it was pointing to. Desire is the soul's way of knocking, not to pull you into chaos, but to invite you deeper, into the parts you've abandoned, into the self you're becoming. What integration looks like in real life. You no longer run from your cravings. You meet them. You no longer shame your thoughts. You hold them. You feel attraction without needing to act. You experience pleasure without guilt. You move toward truth, not performance. You find intimacy, not just in another's touch, but in your own silence, in the way you know yourself, in the way your body no longer feels like a battlefield, but like a home. You walk into the world no longer fragmented, no longer at war with your longing, but guided by it, held by it, transformed through it. That is integration, not a final destination, but a way of being with yourself, moment by moment. Individuation is a sacred act of reclamation. This journey is not for the faint of heart. To become whole is to face what you've avoided, to sit with what once shamed you, to forgive what once broke you, and most of all, to reclaim what was once yours. Your erotic wisdom, your intuitive knowing, your emotional truth. Casey called this a soul retrieval. He believed that parts of the self scatter through lifetimes and through trauma, and that healing is about calling them back. You are not here to become something new. You are here to remember what you already are, to return to the original soul essence you've always carried beneath the layers. Desire is not in the way, it is the bridge back to that essence. You can now hold what once held you. In the beginning, your cravings held you hostage. They confused you, dominated you, drove your decisions. But now, you can hold them. You can feel the heat rise and stay grounded. You can sense the tension in your body and breathe through it. You can sit with the ache to be chosen and gently whisper, I choose me first. This is real power, not the power to control others, but the power to no longer be controlled by what was unconscious. You've walked through the shadow. You've touched the shame. You've listened to the dream. And now you are no longer split. You are no longer pretending not to feel. You are fully alive. The sacred erotic self. When Jung spoke of individuation, he always pointed to integration of opposites, masculine and feminine, instinct and reason, light and dark, sacred and sensual. And when Casey spoke of spiritual alignment, he echoed the same, the soul must unite what the world has torn apart. Body and spirit, longing and stillness, human and divine. In both men's teachings, the message was clear. Your sexual energy is not a detour. It's a doorway, a way into presence, a way into purpose, a way into love, not performance, not projection, but real, intimate, grounded love. When you integrate your erotic self, you stop chasing, you start creating, you stop hiding, you start shining, and you realize this longing that once felt dangerous was actually your soul asking to be whole. Final reflection. The journey never ends. Individuation isn't something you finish. It's something you live every day with tenderness, with courage, with honesty. You'll still feel longing. You'll still feel resistance. You'll still meet people who stir something wild inside you. But now you'll know. It's not about them. It's your soul speaking. Your energy waking. Your deeper self reminding you. You are not broken. You are becoming, not by rejecting your desire, but by walking with it, fully awake, fully alive, and finally, fully whole. So now, take a breath. Let everything you've just felt settle. You don't need to rush to fix anything. You don't need to figure it all out. Just allow this truth to land softly. Your desire is not your enemy. It's your invitation to return, to listen, to begin again. Carl Jung never asked us to be perfect. He asked us to be honest, to walk into the places we once feared, and find ourselves there waiting, and maybe tonight, or tomorrow, or some quiet moment in the weeks ahead. You'll feel it, that familiar pull, that ache you used to judge. And this time, instead of running, you'll sit with it, you'll listen, and you'll say, I'm ready to become whole. If this video stirred something inside you, a memory, a realization, a breath of truth you didn't know you needed, you're not alone. This space is for you, for the ones waking up to their shadows, to their power, to their soul. Subscribe to stay on the path with us. Share this with someone who carries silent longing. Comment below. What part of this message spoke to the forgotten part of you? And until we meet again, stay curious, Stay tender, and above all, stay true to what's rising in you. You're not becoming someone else. You're finally remembering who you are.